Hello Raptors fans, and welcome back to Raptors Report. Today we will be discussing the Toronto Raptors game against the Memphis Grizzlies, but before we do that, I want to give you two more fake trades. Two of the players that I think have the potential to move on and contribute elsewhere. It's not that I don't like these players, it's that I am seeing the writing on the wall. This team is looking to lose games at this point. They are looking to pick up future assets. They are looking for players to develop, all that good stuff. This is a rebuilding season. This is what rebuilding teams do. So I have two more trades for you guys. I know Christmas is over and I left 3 presents under the Christmas tree last video. Thank you for letting me know what you think about those trades. There's some good discussion that they brought up. So if you haven't watched that video, just check out the last video that I made. I dealt 3 veterans, Jakob Poeltl, Kelly Olynyk, and Chris Boucher. Today, we're going to discuss the other players that the Toronto Raptors could potentially deal this season. The first of whom is Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown was one of the major returns, especially in terms of salary, for Pascal Siakam. When the Toronto Raptors traded Pascal to the Indiana Pacers, they picked up a couple of pieces, notably the first-round draft pick that turned into Jacoby Walter, a future first from the Pacers, next year's first, and then they picked up Bruce Brown. And Bruce Brown has not been very good for the Toronto Raptors. In fact, he has not played at all this season and was not very good last season. However, he did have a very good run with 2 teams, the Brooklyn Nets, where he played alongside Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and then he moved along to the Denver Nuggets 2 seasons ago, where he was able to win a championship and was a major piece for them, coming off of the bench and providing a lot of tools, defense, shooting, playmaking. He was kind of a jack-of-all-trades player that they could bring off of the bench, and he was pretty positive for them. I liked him in that role, and I think that other teams, if they harken back to those days, maybe they see Bruce Brown as a contributor. At least I hope they do, because he hasn't been very good the past 2 seasons, and as I mentioned, he is out with a knee injury. So you have to kind of temper your expectations for what the Toronto Raptors can get back for him, especially considering he is in the final year of his deal, which is a blessing and a curse. Because I think that at $23 million a season, even if he reached his potential as a player, he's probably still a little overpaid. However, he is a contributor if he's healthy, and we've all seen what he can do in the playoffs. I think that he could draw interest around the league. So the first trade that I have for you guys is a trade to the Los Angeles Lakers. And this trade would be featuring Bruce Brown going out. The Raptors would be getting back Gabe Vincent. Yeah, I made another trade last week for Gabe Vincent. Do I really like Gabe Vincent as a player? Do I want to see him play for the Raptors? In fact, I've traded for him twice. No, not really. Not a big fan of Gabe Vincent. He is the cost of doing business, however, because his salary at $11 million is kind of a burden on the LA Lakers, and that is why they would be willing to give him up. So he has salary that is not very useful for the Lakers, so he would be bundled along with future assets. Another contract that is not looking too hot for the Lakers right now is Jared Vanderbilt. And Jared Vanderbilt is a power forward who does not have a lot of offensive skills. He is mostly a defensive player. He can grab rebounds. And if you watched last night's game, yeah, maybe the Raptors could use a role player who could play defense and grab rebounds because they got their asses whooped by the Memphis Grizzlies. But this is mostly for the last part of the deal. So Christian Wood is also tacked on here. He hasn't played this season because of an injury, so he's not really what I'm after here. He would be included to make the salary work because the Lakers are over the apron. Take a look at that last little tidbit in the trade, a 2029 first-round pick. The LA Lakers would be giving up 2 unfavorable contracts, the Vanderbilt contract and the Vincent contract, and getting back Bruce Brown, who would likely be healthy in time for the playoffs and the push toward the playoffs, and give the Lakers a solid contributor who can play alongside LeBron James. LeBron James, Nikola Jokic, kind of similar players on offense, very good passers, like to play with the ball in their hands. They're looking for guys who can shoot, play defense, and do some other stuff, be toolsy players, guys who don't need the ball in their hands in order to be effective. What the Raptors get back are 2 things. So they get to kick the tires on Jared Vanderbilt, and they get to more than kick the tires because he is paid quite a bit of money. That contract is not looking too hot. 4 years is a pretty big investment for a player who's essentially a role player. And in terms of ranking the archetypes in the league, he is part of an archetype that is not very strong right now, which is a non-shooting defensive power forward. However, the 2029 first-round pick for the LA Lakers could be a very good pick. LeBron James has been declining for years now, and although he has had a bounce back recently, this is probably his worst season in a while. And it looks like he is reaching the end of his career. I mean, he has looked fantastic the past couple of weeks, but there are definitely some weak links in the LeBron power armor that we have seen for 2 decades now. And it looks like the Lakers perhaps could be on their last legs, at least this current iteration. So that 2029 pick might be worth quite a bit in just a couple of seasons. The Raptors could be looking at something in the lottery. And while they would be taking on future salary, the Jared Vanderbilt salary in particular is not that great, they would be getting a serviceable role player. Jared Vanderbilt can play minutes. It's not like he is completely useless. It's just that he is not a very valuable type of player. I think that this deal would be done primarily just to get that first-round pick. That's my take on a Bruce Brown trade. Let me know what you think about that one. Next up, we have another trade involving a player who's on the last year of his contract, Davion Mitchell, who has had a pretty good tenure with the Toronto Raptors. He has been a strong defender. He can really hound guys, dog guys on the perimeter, follow them around screens. His screen navigation is excellent. He is able to stick onto players. And then he is not a very impactful player on the offensive end. What you would be looking for is a team that requires a very good defender on the perimeter, a team that has strong stars that can carry role players who aren't maybe as impactful on the offensive end, and then have some tradable salary that isn't going to make a big difference for them, and then something a little extra. I'm not expecting a first-round pick back for Davion Mitchell, but I do think that the Raptors should be compensated for him because I think that he's a solid role player. The trade that I came up with was to the Philadelphia 76ers. The Philadelphia 76ers have all of the ingredients that I mentioned. They have 2 star and superstar caliber talents in Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And hey, there is not only some future tidbits coming back the Raptors' way, there is a reunion. So this would be Davion Mitchell being traded for Eric Gordon, Kyle Lowry, Reggie Jackson, and a 2027 second-round pick. Kyle Lowry has a special place in the hearts of Toronto Raptors fans. One of my favorite Raptors of all time. In fact, my favorite Raptor of all time. Let's just be honest here. They would be getting him back, but this is more than that. So I explained why it could work for the 76ers. They need a guy on the perimeter who they can put on other teams' best perimeter players. They don't really have a guy like that. Caleb Martin can guard perimeter players. He's more of a wing forward. They could use a guy who could really kind of clamp down other teams' best perimeter players, especially guys maybe like Damian Lillard. They could have problems guarding him on the perimeter, and the Bucks could be a first-round matchup for them. So the guys are trading away. Eric Gordon is nothing special. He has 1 more year on his contract, a player option, which he is almost certain to pick up. Reggie Jackson would be trade salary filler. He has been, a non-impact player for the 76ers. Pretty horrendous for them. Kyle Lowry has been a serviceable player who has reached his best before date. He is playing at a fraction of what he was capable of. He still makes smart plays, and you can trust him with the ball in his hands, but he's having a poor shooting season. He doesn't have legs to finish. He's not really a very good defender anymore, although he can, draw charges and do the sort of crafty stuff that you would expect from a longtime veteran guard, but he is no longer an impact player. So for the 76ers, they would be shedding a year of Eric Gordon's salary. The Raptors could buy him out. I don't really see a purpose for him being on the Toronto Raptors this season or next season. But this would be primarily for, getting Kyle Lowry back, number 1. Maybe he could retire as a Raptor. They could keep him on. If he wants to play another season, they could give him a minimum contract or something like that. But they would be getting a second-round pick for this and taking on a little bit of Eric Gordon's salary. and the 76ers would be getting a defensive stopper on the perimeter. I kind of like this trade for the Toronto Raptors and for the 76ers. I think it seems like a pretty fair swap, but I'd like to know what you guys think about it in the comments, because this is 2 more presents, and I know Christmas has passed, so maybe they're, Hanukkah presents for those of you who celebrate under the menorah. I'm not exactly sure how presents are given out on Hanukkah, but let me know if I've completely butchered the holiday for you guys. Moving on to some more somber news, the Toronto Raptors lost big time to the Memphis Grizzlies last night. This is the most points they've ever given up in a regulation basketball game. The next highest total was 152 to the LA Clippers way back in 1998. A complete drubbing by the Memphis Grizzlies. Why don't we get into the player evaluations, because I think that we should go over how the team played. The stats that I'm going to read off here have to be taken with a grain of salt, because while a lot of players did put up a lot of points and assists and shot well from the field and all of that kind of stuff, the box score is going to lie to you, because it wasn't the points being put up by the Toronto Raptors, more the opposite. The defense and the rebounding were horrendous. So we're going to go through these stats, and I'm going to tell you what I think of the different players in the game. So we will start off with RJ Barrett, who I think had the best game of Toronto Raptor last night. He had 27 points on 18 shots. He was 2 of 5 from 3, 5 of 7 from the line. It seems as though his free throw struggles are a thing of the past, knock on wood. He's been average in the past, and I don't really see why he couldn't return to that, so it looks like that swoon is over. He had 9 rebounds. He was 1 rebound shy of a triple-double, 10 assists, only 2 turnovers. 10 assists to 2 turnovers is very good. And I think had a very solid game, especially on offense. More than solid on offense. He was great on offense. He had a lot of very nice drives into the lane. He did a great job catching and shooting. That is his strength. He is a very good floor spacer when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. He can catch and shoot when he doesn't have to put the ball on the floor before he shoots it. I think that that's a very good shot for him. And I'm pleased with that, because it portends well for him and Scotty being able to play next to one another. I just thought that, in general, I think that his games have been very strong as of late, and it's a real shame that he's kind of being let down by the rest of the team. He's having these very strong performances. He was the one fighting against the Raptors getting blown out. He was a positive force. He was not the biggest culprit. And I think that you have to give him his flowers, and I really hope that these kinds of performances can be paid off by the rest of the team, especially from a defensive perspective. If you have a guy going out there and putting points and assists and grabbing boards and doing all that kind of stuff, not turning the ball over, it would be nice if other guys could contribute and play roles and grab rebounds and box out and be the defensive force to help him translate these good statistical performances into victories. So I think he had a good night. Next up, we got Scotty Barnes. I was praising him for his paint presence and rebounding and his ability to block shots and put up resistance in the paint, but he's playing out of position, especially when he's playing up against other true fives. So Zach Edey, for example, is 7'4", and Scotty Barnes isn't even close to that. He doesn't have the height to play and bang in the post and contest those turnaround hook shots and whatnot, or adequately box out a guy as large as Zach Edey. So it's not all his fault when your team gives up 155 points and a gazillion points in the paint and a ton of offensive rebounds. I think he could have been better there, and not to pin the entire loss on him, because as I said, he's playing out of position. He's playing next to other players that aren't exactly defensive stalwarts, but we'll get into that. On offense, he had a good night. 26 points on 20 shots, very similar to RJ in terms of offensive impact. 6 rebounds, 8 assists, a steal, only 3 turnovers. So I thought he had a strong night. He was 2 of 5 from 3, so he had an efficient 3-point shooting night. 4 of 4 from the line. I think he did a good job on offense, and he had a couple of moments where he was playing good defense, especially in the first half. The first half was a lot closer than the second half, and he was part of the lineup along with Jonathan Mobo and Davion Mitchell, who were able to slow the Grizzlies down and kind of took it to them with their bench unit in the game. So he did have a couple of shining moments on defense, but I think I'll just say an average game, because the Raptors got absolutely bushwhacked defensively and on the boards, and he's one of the bigs, so it's hard to give like too high marks, even though I think he had an okay game on the offensive side of the ball. Next up, we'll talk Kelly Olynyk, and okay, so Kelly Olynyk, let's read off the stats, and then I'll give you my impression of what I thought of him as a player last night. 14 points on 9 shots. He was 2 of 4 from 3. He had 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 turnovers. That seems like a great night for a stretch big. He hit threes, he grabbed some boards, he made plays in only 23 minutes of the game. I thought he had a really poor night. And the reason for that is because he is simply just not a good defender, rim protector, or defensive rebounder at this stage of his career. Those were always kind of his weaknesses as a player, but now that he has reached 33 and his limited athleticism that he had as a player in his younger years has kind of all gone away, and he's very ground bound. He has moves on offense, very crafty moves, but on the defensive side of the ball, he just got crushed by Zach Edey. And again, he is a stretch big who's kind of a power forward, small ball big that you can play off of the bench, and it's not a good matchup for him. Zach Edey is a monster. He's a gigantic human being. He went over Kelly's back multiple times, just pushed him under the basket, put his arms out, reached over Kelly's head, and grabbed the board. That happened over and over and over again. Some of it was his fault, where he wasn't boxing out properly. He would come over to contest a shot and leave Zach open. And of course, you want to see your center protect the basket, but he doesn't have the foot speed to recover and contest a shot from Zach Edey. So there were a ton of lob passes to Edey and deep post touches for Zach Edey. And it was really just the offensive rebounding where they were getting creamed the entire evening, especially when Kelly was in the game. So I will say a poor night, even though on the stat sheet, you look at the box score, you would think that he had a pretty good game. It was very frustrating to watch. And I think that he could work for another team that has some better rim protection, some players that he can play next to. Maybe you can hide him a little bit better than the Raptors can. But yeah, he had a pretty bad evening, especially from a defensive perspective. Next up, we'll talk Ochai Agbaji, because I think he had a decent night on defense. He guarded both Morant in stints and also Desmond Bane in stints, and neither guy really popped off. Ja Morant had 15 points on 10 shots, decent efficiency. Desmond Bane had 19 points on 13 shots, so it's not like he shut anybody down, but he was playing decent defense. And then on offense, he didn't have a very good night. 10 points on 11 shots, no rebounds, which was a huge issue for the Raptors, so he was a culprit there. And the big problem was that he was 1 of 6 from 3, so didn't have a very good night shooting the ball. But this was all kind of a defense and rebounding problem, and I think that he did okay defensively against the guards. I don't think that the guards of the Grizzlies were really the big issue here, but it wasn't a fantastic night from him. Next up, Grady Dick, 14 points on 12 shots. He was 1 of 4 from 3. He had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and 3 turnovers. So turnovers have been a little bit of an issue for Grady. He's starting to play with the ball in his hands a little bit more these days, especially in transition. And his ball handling is a little wobbly. I think that teams know that they should attack him when he has the ball in his hands, because it's not a plus skill for him at the moment. And he does have a couple of issues converting on drives. He did have a couple of nice drives that he finished with, like his patented circus layup package, but he does struggle finishing a little bit. He only played 25 minutes. The bench played a lot this game because there were some players off of the bench who I think did a better job playing defense. And garbage time started early in this game. And then defensively, his main cover was Jalen Wells. Jalen Wells is a very, very impressive rookie for the Memphis Grizzlies. He was drafted in the 2nd round, and he's only 21, and he has potential to be in the Rookie of the Year conversation. I think that he outplayed Grady Dick. He hit a whole bunch of threes. Grady had a difficult time tracking him around on the perimeter. So yeah, not a great night from Grady Dick. And that's the starting lineup. We'll go to the bench. Chris Boucher. We'll start with him because he had a good offensive night, but again, when your team gets stomped and gives up 155 points and tons of offensive rebounds, the guys you have to look at are the bigs. And Chris Boucher had 15 points on 12 shots. He was 2 of 5 from 3, so good there. 5 rebounds. That said, 3 of them were offensive and only 2 defensive rebounds, and the Raptors really needed help on the defensive boards, which Boucher is not a great defensive rebounder. He's very slender, and he has a difficult time boxing out, both because of his physical tools and also because he just kind of forgets. and he'll allow other players to sneak in and grab boards because he likes to try and out-jump players for rebounds, which is helpful on the offensive glass, but on the defensive glass, it's all about boxing out and clearing the paint and putting yourself between your man and the basket, and he didn't do a good job there. 0 assists, 0 steals, 0 blocks, 1 turnover. So on offense, good night from Chris Boucher. On defense and on the boards, just not a good night. He was one of the reasons that the Toronto Raptors gave up so many points in the paint and why they got obliterated on the boards. So can't give a very good grade there. Jonathan Mobo had probably one of the worst games of his career. Again, he's another big, not very tall, obviously outmatched by some of the players, the large Memphis Grizzlies team. They have a lot of tall guys. Even though Santi Aldama went down with an injury, he's one of their best front court players. He went down with what looked like a lower leg injury early in the game. It didn't really matter for them. They have a bunch of great role players, bigs, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., Zach Edey, of course. They have a ton of talented and strong big men, and Mobo has trouble finishing around those types of players. His touch is not very good on the offensive end, and then again on the boards, they were just getting obliterated on the boards, and he wasn't putting up enough of a fight, and he's undersized. So 2 points on 1 of 7 shooting. He missed a ton of bunnies around the rim. His floater is not looking very accurate. He had 6 rebounds, 3 offensive, 1 assist, 2 steals, 3 blocks, which is nice, 1 turnover. But again, undersized, not delivering on the defensive glass enough, and those bunnies that he's missing are just brutal. He'll have the play created for him by either Scotty or RJ or Kelly Olynyk or another player, and then he'll get the ball deep inside and not be able to convert on a layup. So he's got to work on his touch somehow, maybe his footwork, maybe just getting that floater down, more reps. I'm not exactly sure what the issue is, but it's kind of concerning that he's not being able to convert around the basket. Davion Mitchell played, and he played pretty well. He did okay guarding Ja Morant. That was one of his primary covers. He came off of the bench and did a really good job in the second quarter when the Raptors were able to tie the game in the second quarter, and he was a big part of that. The ball pressure that he was able to put on the Grizzlies. He, Mobo, and Scotty Barnes for that stint did a good job of slowing down the Memphis Grizzlies, especially when they went to their bench. He gave them a lot of problems. So he also had 6 points. They were both threes. I think that's kind of one of his best skills on offense. He's not a great shooter, but he can make enough catch and shoot jump shots that you can't completely ignore him out there. And he had 5 assists, and 2 steals. So I thought a good game from Davion Mitchell, and good defensive games where I thought he was pretty good throughout. And there were a couple of other players who played, but it was all kind of shuffling deck chairs around on the Titanic as the Raptors just got stomped. And we'll talk about the game right now. This was really Zach Edey's coming out party. This was like a huge night for him. He had 21 points. He had 16 rebounds, 9 offensive rebounds, and 2 blocks. Really impressive swat on Chris Boucher. He was dominant. Just completely crushed the Raptors with his various hook shots, getting deep in the paint. They weren't able to get him out of there, setting screens. I think that he still has some issues on the defensive side. He had trouble keeping up with Kelly Olynyk and Chris Boucher and those kinds of guys. So it's not like he was absolutely dominating the Raptors defensively, but on the boards, when you get 9 offensive rebounds, it's almost impossible for the other team to win the game when you create 9 extra possessions. And almost all of them, it seemed like all of them resulted in scores. Either he would get the putback or the hook shot or whatever, or he'd pass it back out, the Grizzlies would pass it around the horn, and then Jalen Wells would bang a 3. Yeah, I mean, Brandon Clark was great on the offensive glass. Jaren Jackson Jr. also good on the offensive glass. They just have a whole bunch of players who play hard, play smart. Oh yeah, and how could I forget, Scottie Pippen Jr. was just a beast, like completely destroyed the Raptors. The perimeter defense of the Raptors folded, couldn't guard him. Oh God, even Luke Kennard got in on the party late in the game. He started banging threes. That's what really pushed the score up to 155 points. And then boo to Taylor Jenkins for reinserting Zach Edey back into the game in the blowout in garbage time. I didn't really understand that. He was the best player for the Grizzlies and he played even more minutes. I guess they're trying to pump up his numbers for Rookie of the Year. So, you know, he came back in. He only played 27 minutes, which is kind of flabbergasting that he was able to get 16 rebounds in that amount of time. So it was just a complete beatdown. Nothing really to take away from this game. The Raptors are too small. And, oh yeah, Darko got thrown out of the game. He was mad at a non-call on Scotty Barnes. I'm not going to say the whistle was perfect or anything. I think that the Raptors probably come out on the losing end of the ref equation every night, but this was not a particularly egregious game in terms of the refs. I think that there were a couple of bad calls, including the one that he was mad about, but I think it was really about trying to send a message to his club to play harder, have some pride, go out and make a difference. I think he was probably frustrated as well, just angry at how things were going. The Raptors just were getting kicked while they were down. Memphis is a very deep team. So in the second half, when they went to the bench, there was not a lot of let up. They kept pushing and making shots and scoring and grabbing offensive rebounds. It was a brutal game and one of the worst games I've seen the Raptors play. Let me know your thoughts if this was the worst game you've seen. What game you think is worse. This is certainly the most points they've ever given up in regulation, 155. Tough pill to swallow, not a very good game. Next up, the Raptors played the Atlanta Hawks in Toronto. That's on Sunday at 6 o'clock. The Hawks just won an amazing game against the Chicago Bulls in the fourth quarter, where they scored 20 straight points to come down from like a huge deficit and blow the Bulls out of their building. The Hawks are looking good this season. They have a lot of contributors. They're having bounce back seasons from a bunch of their players. They have a lot of young talent, and they have Trae Young, who's having a good season. It's looking up for them. They're probably going to be one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference moving forward, so that'll be a tough game for the Raptors, especially if Poeltl is still injured. Didn't really talk about Poeltl. Maybe I should have. His presence and rebounding and all of the things he brings to the team were sorely missing last night, and it looks pretty tough for the Raptors to win games while he's out. So we'll see if the Raptors can win that game. In any case, that is the video. What do you think about the trades that I proposed at the beginning of the video? Like them, hate them, let me know. Also, what do you think about last night's game against the Grizzlies? They got stomped. Was it the worst game you've ever seen? Close to it? Not that bad? Raptors did score 126 points, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that game. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Always helps the channel out. If you want to, leave a comment. I try and respond to all comments here on YouTube and also on Twitter and Blue Sky, where you can reach me at Raps Report. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Raptors Report, your source for in-depth Raptors content.